What happens when a man walks onto a daisy-bright television set, full of good intentions, ready to talk about something close to his heart, only to find himself sitting across from someone who has already decided she does not like him? What happens when the cameras are rolling, the audience is watching, and the woman with the microphone starts saying things that make your jaw drop? What happens when a simple chat show visit turns into something nobody in that studio could have predicted? In just 49 seconds of one particular exchange, Denise Welch would say something so cutting, so unnecessary, and so deeply personal that Nick Knowles would have no choice but to do the one thing that daytime television almost never sees. He would get up and walk out. But before we get to that moment, we need to go back to the very beginning. Because this story does not start with a fight. It starts with a man who thought he was just coming in for a friendly conversation. Nick Knowles had been booked to appear on Loose Women. That in itself was not unusual. The show had been running for years, bringing in guests from all walks of life, sitting them down on that famous panel sofa, and putting questions to them in front of a live studio audience. The format was simple. 4 women on the panel, 1 guest in the hot seat, and a conversation that was supposed to feel warm and entertaining. Nick was known to millions of people across Britain. He had spent years presenting shows about building and renovation, most famously fronting a program where teams of volunteers worked together to transform the homes of people who were struggling. See, he was the kind of man who people felt they knew. Approachable, genuine. Someone who wore his heart on his sleeve and was not ashamed of it. He walked into the studio that day looking relaxed. He was dressed simply. He smiled at the audience as he came through. He took his seat across from the panel and settled in, crossing one leg over the other and leaning back slightly, the way a person does when they feel comfortable and have nothing to hide. The 4 women on the panel that day were Denise Welch, Andrea McLean, Nadia Sawalha, and Kay Adams. Each of them had their own style. Andrea tended to be warm and gentle in her questioning. Nadia could be playful and funny. Kay was direct but fair. And Denise. Well, Denise Welch was a different proposition entirely. Denise had a reputation. She was not afraid to say what she thought. She had strong opinions, and she shared them freely. Sometimes that made for brilliant television. Sometimes it made for something else entirely. Nick did not know yet which version of Denise he was going to get that day. Andrea opened the conversation with a smile. The audience had given Nick a warm welcome when he walked out. The kind of natural, genuine applause that cannot be faked or manufactured. People actually liked him. You could feel it in the room. "Nick, it is so lovely to have you here. You have been absolutely everywhere lately, and we just wanted to sit down and have a proper chat with you." Nick smiled back. "Thank you. It is great to be here. I always enjoy coming on the show. You lot always make me feel very welcome." There was light laughter from the audience. The atmosphere was easy, comfortable. Exactly what you would expect from the first 30 seconds of a daytime chat show appearance. The kind of thing that feels so natural and unremarkable that you would never guess, sitting at home watching it, that the whole thing was about to come apart at the seams. Kay leaned forward slightly and picked up her notes. "So Nick, you have been doing some really interesting work lately. Tell us what has been keeping you busy." Nick nodded. "Well, there is a lot going on, but the thing that has been really close to my heart recently is the work we have been doing with communities. Getting people together. Building things. Not just buildings, but, a sense of belonging. A sense of pride in where you live." He spoke with genuine feeling. You could hear it in his voice. This was not a man rattling off a prepared speech. This was someone who meant what he was saying. Someone who had thought about this deeply and lived it and cared about it in a way that you cannot manufacture for a television appearance. Nadia was nodding warmly. "I love that. I really do. And you have always been someone who, You seem like you actually care. Do you know what I mean? Like it is not just a job for you. It is not just a job, Nick said, leaning forward a little. It never has been. When you see what happens to people when they feel like someone has their back, when they feel like the community around them actually gives a damn, it changes everything. It really does. I have seen it with my own eyes more times than I can count. And every single time, it still gets me. The audience responded warmly. A gentle ripple of applause. The kind that comes naturally. Sigh without prompting, because people are genuinely moved by what they are hearing. Several audience members were nodding. One woman near the front had her hand pressed to her chest, the universal signal of someone who is touched. Kay followed up. And how do you find the communities you work with? Do people come to you, or is it the other way around? Both, really, Nick said. Sometimes we hear about a place that is struggling. Sometimes people reach out. But the honest answer is that you do not have to look very far. There are communities all over this country that are brilliant and strong and full of incredible people who just need someone to say, right, we are here. What do you need? And as soon as you say that, the energy that comes back it is electric, honestly. Andrea was smiling. She glanced along the panel and sharing a look with Nadia that said something like, see, this is why we love having him on. And then Denise Welch spoke. She had been quiet up to that point, sitting slightly back, watching, not with warmth exactly, with something more careful, something that was calculating its moment. And when she spoke, her voice had a particular edge to it. Not hostile exactly, but not warm either. It was the voice of someone who has already made up their mind and is now in the business of proving themselves right. Nick, she said with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Can I just ask you something? Because I think our audience deserves a bit of honesty here. Nick turned to her, still relaxed. Of course. Ask away. Right, Denise said, setting down the card she had been holding with a small, deliberate motion. But because I have been sitting here listening to all of this, and it all sounds very lovely. Very noble. But I have to say, when I look at you, I do not see a community hero. I see someone who is very good at selling a version of himself. The studio went quiet, not completely silent, but the easy warmth that had been in the room a moment before was gone, just like that, replaced by something tense and uncertain, the kind of atmosphere that settles on a room when something unexpected has happened and nobody yet knows how to respond to it. Nick blinked, just once. Then he smiled, but it was a careful smile now, the kind of smile that a person wears when they are deciding how to handle a situation. That is an interesting take, he said quietly. Is it wrong, though? Denise pressed. She was leaning forward now, her elbows on the desk. Because I think there is a conversation to be had here about authenticity, about whether the person we see on screen is actually who you are, or whether it is, you know, a very carefully managed image. Andrea shifted in her seat. You could see it, a small movement, the kind that says, I am not sure about this, and I am not sure I want to be part of it. Kay kept her face neutral, but her eyes moved between Denise and Nick, watching carefully, a professional reading the room. Nick took a breath. I think, he said, choosing his words carefully, that everyone who knows me would tell you that what you see is what you get. I have never pretended to be anything I am not. I have had a complicated life, like most people have. I have made mistakes, like most people have. But I have never tried to sell anyone a false version of myself. But you have, though, haven't you? Denise said. She said it very matter-of-factly. Not as a question. Almost as a statement of fact that she was just waiting for him to confirm. I mean, you have had some very well-documented, shall we say, personal difficulties. And yet, here you are, the wholesome family man, the man of the people, the builder with a heart of gold. Does that not feel a little convenient? There it was. The moment when a conversation stops being a conversation and becomes something else. Nick was still. Very still. The relaxed posture from a few minutes ago was gone. He was sitting up straighter now. His hands, which had been loose in his lap, were now resting on his knees. "Denise," he said, and his voice was even, measured. The voice of a man who is keeping himself in check on purpose. "I think you and I might have a very different understanding of what this conversation was supposed to be about." Denise laughed. It was a short laugh, almost dismissive, like she found the very idea of his objection slightly amusing. "I am just asking questions, Nick. That is what we do on the show." "There is a difference," Nick said, "between asking questions and making accusations." "I have not accused you of anything," Denise said, spreading her hands wide. The picture of innocence, the gesture of someone who knows exactly what they are doing and is enjoying every second of it. "I have just said that there is a gap between the image and the reality, and I think people at home would want to know. Which one is the real Nick Knowles?" Nadia leaned forward. Her voice was gentle, almost trying to ease the temperature down in the way that someone does when they can feel a situation getting away from itself. "I think what Denise might be getting at is, we all have different sides to us, don't we? And I think what viewers love about you is that you do seem very real." It was a kind attempt to redirect, a diplomatic move, a way of offering Nick a different version of the question that he could actually answer without the whole thing spiraling further. But Denise was not done. "No, Nadia, I am going to push on this, because I think it matters." She turned back to Nick. She was not smiling now. "You talk about community and caring and all of that. But what about your personal life? What about the way you have treated the people closest to you? Because that tells you more about a person than any television show ever could." Nick looked at her directly. His jaw was tight. Just slightly. A small tell. The only outward sign of what was clearly happening beneath the surface. "My personal life," he said very quietly, "is my personal life." "But you use your personal life," Denise said, her voice rising just a little. Not shouting. Not quite. But gaining a kind of momentum. "You talk about your son. You talk about your family. You use those things to build this image of yourself. So if you are going to bring your personal life into your public persona, you cannot then say it is off limits when someone wants to examine it a bit more closely. You cannot have it both ways." The audience was very quiet now. Andrea McLean looked genuinely uncomfortable. Not just professionally uncomfortable, the way a host does when a segment is going off the rails, but personally uncomfortable, the way a person does when they are watching something unfair happen in front of them and are not quite sure what they are allowed to do about it. "I think maybe we should." She hesitated. Kay Adams stepped in, smooth and measured. "Nick, obviously you do not have to respond to anything you do not want to. I want to make that clear." "No, it is all right," Nick said. He was looking at Denise. "I would actually like to respond, because I think what is happening here deserves a proper response." He uncrossed his legs and leaned forward. His elbows went onto his knees, and he clasped his hands together. It was a posture that said, "I am taking this seriously, and I expect you to as well." "Denise," he said, "I came here today to talk about work I am proud of. Work that has genuinely helped people. Real people. People whose lives are better than they were. I did not come here to defend my character to someone who has decided, before I even sat down, that I am not a good person. And I think, if you are honest with yourself, you will know that what you are doing right now has nothing to do with journalism or holding people accountable. It has to do with something else entirely." Denise's eyebrows went up. "Is that right?" "I think it is," Nick said. "I think you came in today ready to pick a fight, and I am not going to give you one." There was a beat of silence, And then Denise did something that nobody on that panel and nobody in that audience was expecting. She laughed, properly laughed, not a polite laugh, not a nervous laugh, but a loud, full laugh that carried around the studio. The kind of laugh that is meant to diminish, to reduce the thing that has just been said, to make the person who said it feel small. "Oh, that is brilliant," she said. "That is absolutely brilliant. You know what that is? That is someone who has just been caught out, getting defensive." Nick stared at her. "I beg your pardon," he said. "You heard me," Denise said, still smiling. The smile was back now. The one that does not reach the eyes. Getting defensive is not the same as being honest, and I think the audience can see the difference. Andrea put her hand out, physically, towards Denise. "Denise, come on." "No, Andrea, I am serious," Denise said, and her voice had a quality to it now that was almost righteous. Like she genuinely believed she was doing something important. Something that needed to be done. I think this is exactly the kind of conversation that needs to happen. Because we have too many people on television who are given a free pass just because they are likable. And I am not going to sit here and give Nick Knowles a free pass just because people like him. Nick was quiet for a moment. A long moment. The kind of moment where you can almost see a person deciding something inside themselves. Then he spoke. "Okay," he said. "Right. Let me tell you something." His voice was different now. Still controlled. But there was something beneath it. Something restrained and real. Something that had been calm and patient for a long time and was now making a very deliberate decision about what happened next. "I have sat here and listened to you suggest that I am not who I say I am. I have listened to you suggest that my personal life somehow makes me a fraud. I have listened to you laugh at me when I tried to say something reasonable. And I have genuinely tried, to engage with all of that in good faith. But I think we have reached the end of what I am able to do in good faith here." "Oh, here we go," Denise said, waving her hand slightly. The gesture of someone performing exasperation. "This is where he storms off." Nick looked at her. "I'm not storming anywhere," he said quietly. "I just think there is no point in continuing a conversation with someone who is not actually interested in having one." Denise leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. It was a power move, a physical way of saying, "I am not going anywhere, and I am not backing down. I am very interested in having a conversation. I have been trying to have one for the last 10 minutes. You are the one who keeps deflecting." "Deflecting?" Nick said. He sounded genuinely surprised. The words seemed to catch him off guard in a way that the earlier comments had not. "Denise, you have called me inauthentic. You have implied I am a bad father. You have suggested my whole public career is a con. And you are saying I am deflecting?" "I did not say you were a bad father," Denise said quickly. For the first time, something defensive flickered in her expression. "You said what I do in my personal life makes me a fraud," Nick said. Calm, clear. "What else are you referring to?" Denise opened her mouth and then closed it again. It was a small moment. Very small. Barely 2 seconds long. But the whole studio caught it. That half second where Denise Welch did not have an immediate answer. That tiny gap in the armor. The first sign that the ground beneath her was not as solid as she had thought it was when she started down this road. Nadia jumped in immediately. Her voice was warm and genuine. "Nick, I just want to say, for what it is worth, I think you have been incredibly gracious here. I really do." "Thank you, Nadia," Nick said. He was still looking at Denise. His eyes had not left her face. Kay spoke next. Measured. Professional. "I think we have, probably. We should maybe take a little moment here." She glanced toward the production team. The instinct of a broadcaster who has spent enough years in front of cameras to know exactly when something is about to tip over into something it cannot come back from. But Denise was not finished. "No, Nick," she said, and her voice had a quality now that was slightly different. Not as certain as before. Not quite as sure of itself, but still pushing. Still going. Like someone who has started down a hill and cannot stop the momentum. "I want to understand something. You come in here, you talk about community, you talk about caring, you talk about all of these wonderful things. And the moment someone asks you a slightly harder question, you start talking about ending the conversation. Does that not tell you something about yourself?" Nick looked at her for a long moment, and then something changed in his face. Not anger. Not exactly. Something quieter than anger. Something that looked almost like sadness. The particular kind of sadness that comes when you realize that a situation is not what you thought it was, and cannot become what you had hoped. "You know what?" he said softly. "I feel sorry for you." Denise blinked. The whole panel blinked. Even the audience seemed to hold its breath for a moment. "I do," Nick said. "I genuinely feel sorry for you, because I think that somewhere along the way, something has happened that has made it feel dangerous to just take someone at face value, to believe that someone might actually mean what they say, to sit across from someone and think, maybe this person is all right. Maybe they are not trying to trick me. And I think that is sad. I think that is really sad. For you." The studio was silent. Denise stared at him. For a moment, nobody spoke at all. The silence lasted long enough to become uncomfortable. Long enough for the audience to start to feel it pressing down on them. Long enough for Andrea to look down at her notes and back up again, searching for an exit that was not there yet. And then Denise found her voice again. But it was different now. The confidence was still there on the surface. But something underneath it had shifted. Like a table with one slightly shorter leg that you do not notice until someone puts something heavy on it. "I am not the one who needs to be pitied here," she said. "I am not pitying you," Nick said. "I said I felt sorry. There is a difference." "There is not much difference," Denise said. But the sharpness was muted now. The certainty that had been there at the beginning of this exchange was not quite as present as it had been. Andrea McLean let out a long, slow breath that she had probably not been aware she was holding. Kay was watching Nick with an expression that was hard to read. Thoughtful, maybe, or something close to respect. The expression of a person who is watching someone handle themselves well under pressure and cannot help but notice. Nadia had gone quiet. She was watching the two of them the way you watch something that you cannot quite believe is happening in front of you. Denise recrossed her arms. "So, what? You think you have come in here and showed everyone what a lovely, patient, kind man you are? Is that what this is?" "I have not tried to show anyone anything," Nick said. "I came in to have a conversation. That is all. That was always all." "Right," Denise said. "And yet somehow you have ended up looking like the victim." "I am not a victim," Nick said. "I have never said I was a victim. I have never suggested I was. I have just said that what you have been doing for the past 15 minutes is not journalism, and it is not a conversation. It is something else." "What is it then?" Denise asked. Her chin was slightly raised. There was a quality to the question that was partly challenging, and partly, for the first time, genuinely curious. As if she actually wanted to hear his answer. Nick looked at her steadily. "I think you know what it is." Another pause. A long one. The room felt very still. Denise said, very quietly, "You're very good at this, aren't you?" Nick said nothing. "The calm, reasonable man," Denise said, and there was something in her voice now that had not been there before. Something that might have been, if you listened very carefully, the beginning of discomfort. "Making me look like the villain." Nick shook his head slowly. "I have not made you look like anything, Denise. You have done that yourself." The audience made a sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a murmur. Something in between. The sound of a crowd that has been watching something build and has just seen the peak of it. Denise's eyes narrowed. She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. "Fine." It was not a retreat exactly, but it was the closest thing to one that Denise Welch had come to in the last quarter of an hour. Andrea leaned forward. Her hands were flat on the desk. "Why don't we just... Nick, tell us a bit more about the community project. I think that is where we started, and it is such an important thing to talk about. Because I genuinely want to hear more about it." She meant it. You could hear that she meant it. She was trying to pull the conversation back to somewhere that made sense. Somewhere that was what a chat show was supposed to be. "Actually," Nick said, and he moved slightly in his seat, shifted his weight. The preparatory movement of someone who is about to stand up. "I think I am done." It landed in the room like a dropped stone. Not with a crash, but with that particular quiet thud of something heavy hitting solid ground. Andrea stopped mid-sentence. Kay looked up sharply. Nadia's eyes went wide. Denise said nothing. "I do not mean that in a dramatic way," Nick said. He kept his voice calm, even, almost gentle. "I just mean, I came here to talk about something that matters to me. Something real. Something that good people put real time and effort and love into. And I do not think this is the right environment for that conversation today. So I think I am going to leave it there." He stood up. He did it slowly and without fuss. The way a man stands up when he has made a decision and is completely at peace with it. Not rushing. Not making a point of it. Just standing. The way a person does at the end of something that has come to its natural conclusion. Andrea said, "Nick, you do not have to." "I know," he said. He looked at her and his expression was warm. Genuinely warm. Like the warmth from a few minutes ago, before everything tilted sideways. "Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate that. Truly." He looked at Nadia. "Thank you." She gave him a small nod. The kind that carries more meaning than most words could. He looked at Kay. A small nod. She nodded back. Something passed between them that was wordless and understood. Then he looked at Denise. He held her gaze for just a moment. Not confrontationally. Not to make a point. He simply looked at her. Steady and clear. And then he said simply, "Take care of yourself." And he turned and walked off the set. The audience made a sound. It was not booing. It was not cheering. It was something more complicated than either of those things. A collective exhale. The sound of a room full of people who had just witnessed something they were not quite sure how to process. The sound of people who came in expecting a chat show and ended up watching something they would not easily forget. Denise sat very still. She was looking at the space where Nick had been sitting. The empty chair. The slight indentation where he had been. The small signs that a person had been there just a moment ago and was now gone. Andrea looked down at her notes, then up again, then around at the panel, then back to camera. And she said, with the professionalism of someone who has been in television long enough to know that the show must go on, no matter what, "Well, we are going to take a short break." And the cameras cut away. But not before the audience at home had seen something that would be talked about for a very long time. Not the argument, not the accusations, not the moments where the temperature rose and the words got harder, but the moment when a man who had been pushed and prodded and questioned and talked over and laughed at simply decided that he did not need to sit there and take it anymore. He did not shout. He did not swear. He did not make a scene. He did not say anything that he would have to take back. He stood up. He said thank you to the people who deserved it. He said, "Take care to the person who had spent 15 minutes trying to undo him." And he walked away with his head up and his dignity absolutely intact. That was the moment. That was Nick Knowles on Loose Women. And while Denise sat in her chair, looking at the space where he had been, while Andrea tried to hold the show together with both hands, while the audience sat in that stunned and complicated silence, one thing was absolutely clear to everyone who was watching. Nick Knowles had walked into that studio as a guest. He had walked out as something more than that. He had walked out as a man who knew exactly who he was, and no amount of questions from the panel table, no amount of raised eyebrows and tilted heads, and talk of authenticity and image and carefully managed personas had been able to change that. Not even close. The set was quieter without him. Somehow, it felt smaller too. Like something had been taken out of it when he left that was not just one person in a chair, but something harder to name. Something like a certain kind of warmth, a certain kind of steadiness. Denise reached for her water glass. She picked it up. She put it down again, without drinking from it. Andrea began speaking to camera, her voice steady and professional. The words came. The broadcast continued. The show went on. That is what television does. It always goes on. But everyone in that room, and everyone watching at home, was still thinking about the man who had just left, about the way he had spoken, the way he had listened, the way he had not risen to the bait that was being dangled in front of him with increasing desperation, the way he had stayed, for as long as he could, in a conversation that had stopped being a conversation long before he finally decided to end it, and about the 49 seconds that had started everything, that one moment, that one exchange, that one comment from Denise Welch that had changed the temperature of the whole room in less time than it takes to boil a kettle. It had come so quickly, so casually, like she had not even thought about it, like she had simply opened her mouth and let the words fall out, not thinking about where they might land or what they might do when they got there. But words always land somewhere. They always arrive. They always do something when they do. Sometimes they bring warmth. Sometimes they bring laughter. Sometimes they build something between two people that was not there before. And sometimes they tear something down. These ones had torn something down. They had landed right in the middle of a conversation that could have been something good, something warm, something worth watching for all the right reasons, something that would have left people feeling better than when they sat down, something that a man had come a long way to have, about work he believed in, about people he had tried to help. Instead, they had turned it into this thing that the audience would be talking about on the bus home, this thing that would be replayed and discussed and argued over. In this moment where a chat show stopped being entertainment and became something raw and harder to look at and impossible to look away from. And through it all, Nick Knowles had been exactly what he always said he was. Just himself, not performing, not deflecting, not spinning or managing or carefully curating anything for anyone. Just a man sitting in a chair, trying to have a real conversation, doing his best to stay calm when someone was doing their level best to rattle him. That's not easy to do on television. Under the lights, with the cameras on you, with an audience watching, with 4 people across the table, and one of them intent on making this as difficult as possible. That is not easy at all. But he did it. And when he finally stood up and walked away, he did that well too. With grace, with quiet dignity, without making it a performance, without turning his exit into a point he was making, with the kind of self-possession that cannot be faked or rehearsed, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than preparation. Some people are born knowing who they are. Others spend their whole lives trying to find out. And some people, it seems, would rather spend their time sitting across from those people and trying to convince them that they do not actually know themselves at all. That the version of themselves they present to the world is just that, a version, a production, a carefully maintained illusion. That, in the end, is what happened on that stage. That is what this whole thing was really about. Not community projects or television personas or personal lives or authenticity or any of the specific words that were used. It was about something much simpler than any of that. One person who was comfortable in their own skin, and one person who, for whatever reason, on that particular day, in that particular room, could not stand to let that go unchallenged. Nick Knowles walked into that studio. He sat down. He tried. And then he stood up. And that, as it turns out, was more than enough.